Hello and welcome, Connected Yoga Teachers. This is episode 11. We're going to talk today about how to introduce yourself in a new way to your yoga students. I'm excited about this because this is a question I get a lot from yoga teachers, whether they're going to create something on their website or they're going to network and meet people or they're excited about doing a Facebook Live video, which we talked lots about last week. If you are watching the replay of this, make sure to either post comments here or go over to the connectedyogateacher.com and you can see all of the show notes. You can post your questions and comments there. I'd love to hear from you guys. Okay, so today we're going to dive in and talk about an elevator speech, your core message. We're going to talk about the importance of story behind your message and how this really simplifies everything in marketing. It simplifies how we're talking to people, but then it also simplifies how we make a poster, what we say when we meet people. When we meet people online or online or in person. And then we're going to talk about how it's important to kind of flow with who you're meeting, what your message is in that moment, and how to be yourself, or really focusing on how it's important to be yourself. So I feel like I didn't really know with choosing the topic and the timing, how the timing was going to be so good. For those of you popping in live, I would love to know if the sound is working. I've tried it 2 times and Facebook is giving me a little bit of a hassle today. So I'm hoping that the sound is working. Okay, so this weekend I got to practice this stuff in person. So I feel like I was taking notes, had things in the back of my mind, and then really practice this because I went to the Toronto Yoga Show. It was so fun. If I got to see you there, hello. If I didn't get to see you there, then I missed you. And next time we'll connect for sure. That was my first time ever to the Toronto Yoga Show. I felt a little bit of pressure just thinking like, I'm a big advocate for community, and so I should go and hang out with the yoga teacher community out there. But I also had a really great invitation from 3 awesome friends, so thank you guys for letting me tag along and showing me how amazing the yoga show can be, taking in a few workshops, learning stuff, and connecting with other teachers. Okay, so I feel like I tried this stuff out. I took some notes as well as did my own research on this. So this is kind of the difference of someone coming up to you and saying, what do you do? And then you saying to them, I'm a yoga teacher. And then the conversation kind of ends. Either they're interested in yoga and they'll continue to ask you more questions, or they're just like, ugh. Okay, I don't know what that means, or I don't have questions to ask, and that conversation kind of ends. So we meet a lot of people out in the world who probably are curious about our type of yoga offering, because as we know, saying I'm a yoga teacher from one person to the next is very different. So we want to be able to introduce ourselves in a way that really speaks to what our unique story is with that, being a yoga teacher. Or maybe it's something else that we identify with other than a yoga teacher. And this is why the message is important. So I'm going to try and stay on track with my notes here for you guys today as well. So I have some questions for you, and if you feel like, oh my gosh, I'm just listening to this and I can't write things down or sit and think about it, don't worry, these questions are also over in our show notes, so just look for episode 11 of the live show. Okay, so first we're just going to start to get into the mindset of core message. What do you believe in and stand for? What is the purpose of the work that you are doing? What is your yoga offering to the world? Why are you really passionate about this work? What has shaped how you share yoga? So what's kind of your story behind that? That's what I mean by that question. Have you been curious about this work for your entire life? If so, how? If you had a room of people listening to you for 30 minutes and you had no fear of public speaking, so we'll just take that out of the equation, what would you want to talk to them about so you could have an impact on how they were living? So these are kind of the things that start to get into what is our core message. And don't feel like, oh my gosh, I have a few different core messages. Just ask yourself those questions first. Let it filter in. For those of you popping in live, can you tell me if the sound is working now? This is time number 3, and I would love to know if this sound is working today. The second thing, I want to make sure that I got all of my notes on that. Oh yeah, we're going to use, so that's one of the tools to get into the core message. But then another tool that I want to introduce to you today, some of you know this from the niche workshop, so this builds on that work, but it also stands on its own. So there's a book called Made to Stick, and it's by Chip and Dan Heath, and I'll put that link in our show notes. Erin, I'm so glad the sound is working. Thank you for letting me know. Thanks for popping in here today. If you want to share anything about kind of, if you have questions about introducing yourself, or if you have kind of a place where you feel like you go and introduce yourself to people, or if you feel like, oh, this is what really helps me, let me know, Erin. So this Made to Stick book, they go through this exercise called the 3 whys. And it gets to the emotional core of an idea. And I'm going to give you an example, so you just basically give your idea and then you ask 3 whys. So for an example, my big thing that I used to do was prenatal yoga. So maybe that's something you really connect with now. And then you're going to figure out what your 3 whys are. Now, just know that this is very individual, so there's no right or wrong answer. It's not like, oh, Shannon said these are the 3 things. These were my 3 whys. When I taught prenatal yoga, they're the 3 whys that then also drove Kim and I to develop Mama Nurture, the prenatal yoga school. So the idea was prenatal yoga, and then we say, why is this important? And so the answer to that for me was, it's important because the health of mothers and babies. And then asking, why is that important? That's important because, to me, because it's the first relationship that a human being has on earth. And why is that important? So that's the 3rd why. To me, that first relationship is important because that's kind of the foundation, the nurturing that a human being receives, and then they're able to offer that to themselves, to others, and then the planet. So I realize in this that you might not have thought like, wow, prenatal yoga is really good for the planet, like the health of the planet. But for me, that's where my mind goes, because I know from a young age I was really concerned about the planet and it showed up all through my life. So that's kind of the emotional core to that idea for me. I'll put the 3 whys, I'll put a nice little graphic on there so you can start asking yourself, okay, what are my 3 whys on there? Another little tool here gets us into the topic of an elevator speech. So there are different opinions on an elevator speech. I think it's handy to create an elevator speech, and then I think it's handy to let it go. So if you've ever heard an elevator speech, it kind of sounds like a really quick commercial, right? So say I'm out cross-country skiing in the winter, and someone comes up to me and I know, okay, we're both interested in skiing. I'm not going to start into my elevator speech like, say, I think prenatal yoga is important because it's the foundational blocks of our relationship and nurturing. Like, this person would be like, what? What are you doing? We're just skiing here together. So it's important to have it in the back of your mind, but it's not the first tool that you use when you're in conversation with someone. We know that. But sometimes when we get into business, we're just like, okay, I've heard about this elevator speech and I need to do it, and I need to let people know what I do. I'm going to share another graphic in the show notes, and it's thanks to Carol Cox of Speaking Your Brand. Carol is in a business group with me, and she has some great insight. She also has a podcast. If you guys are thinking about speaking in front of large groups of people, she's the person to contact for sure. And then she also just has other cool tools on her podcast. I listen to it every week. Thanks, Carol. And I wrote to her personally and said, can you help me with this part of it? Because I've heard her talk about it before, and she really defined it well. So I need to give all the credit to her on this. So it's basically I help, and then you fill in the blank of your target audience or your ideal yoga students. So I help my target audience or my ideal yoga students do this thing. So you define what it is that you help them to do so they can and then get these results. And I'll make sure that I put the graphic. I might even put the graphic here in our comments afterwards. Remind me, guys, if I forget to do that, but it'll definitely be over in the show notes. So that's kind of how you start to get your elevator speech ready. Let me also say that when I went to the yoga conference this weekend, I was afraid of doing this. So I knew that I wanted to do this. I knew that I wanted to get out and network, but it's scary. So I also knew that I really wanted to do this on my own. I planned a whole morning for it to go to the trade show and to go meet people and see what people were offering to yoga teachers, because there's a lot of people there selling their products, and to just kind of walk around and be curious. Now, when I first hit the floor of the trade show, I just thought, well, I'm on my own. Like when you go with friends, it can be a little bit easier sometimes to introduce yourself, or they do it for you. So that's one thing to remember, that I think everyone is afraid to introduce themselves like that. Yeah. So if you're afraid of this, like, oh, I'm going to put myself out there, just know that most people are. And the moment I started to kind of just get into conversation with people and ask them questions, I got more comfortable. So that's kind of when we're going to get into point number 3, and that's the story. So the story behind your why and the story behind how you got to where you are now is really important. It's also important to ask that person lots of questions, ask them their story. So if you're really stuck, you can go up to someone and say, for instance, I went up to someone, they were selling this thing at the yoga show, and I was just really seriously curious about what it was. I saw them trying it out. And so I started asking questions, and they're like, do you want to try it? Yes. And it just evolves into this natural conversation, like, how did you develop this? How did you get started doing this? I'm asking them questions, and then they start asking me questions. Well, are you a yoga teacher? Yeah, I am, but I also have this podcast. And like, I wasn't trying to sell my podcast to these people that are trying to sell this yoga prop. But they got really interested very quickly. So that's kind of the way, it's conversation, and it comes easy to some of us. And for some of us, we just have to remember that when we develop our elevator speech, we develop our core message, it's not like we're going out and throwing that in someone's face. I feel like I had other points on that. Yeah, so really important to ask. Oh yes, the other point on this is that it's really about them as well. When we're trying to network, we want it to be about the people who are potentially going to be our yoga students, want to hear our message, connect with us that way. Okay, did I forget anything? Oh, I want to tell you about one thing going back to number 2 that I had in this. Felicia Slattery, I don't know if I'm saying her last name properly. She's the author of a book called Kill the Elevator Speech, and I listened to her speak a little bit, and what I really resonated with at one point was, she said, those, maybe some of you know, so in my kids' public school, they have one of these. It's called the Buddy Bench, and it's like a yellow bench. I think it has handprints all over it, and it's literally named the Buddy Bench. And so she said, this Felicia, the author of Kill the Elevator Speech, talks about being the traveling buddy bench. So everyone at these trade shows is also feeling the same way. They're feeling like afraid to put themselves out there. It's not easy for everyone. So she said, look for people who are kind of standing alone, looking like, oh my gosh, I'm not talking to anyone, and that might be something. You might be the traveling buddy bench. So maybe that helps you as well. And to just go up and chat to them and ask them questions. For me, it's a little easier to do this when people are at the booth, because they're wanting people to come up and talk to them. But something else with that, you could try practicing going to a place where networking happens. So for yoga teachers, look for different events that are going on at yoga students, and it might not be a yoga class, that might not be where the talking is going on, But at our yoga studio, we have something that's called Round Robin, and that's where different teachers from all over, different studios, different places come in and teach a portion of that class. It's 2 hours long. It's kind of like improv yoga, and our students love it, and the teachers get to connect and meet up. But maybe you want to, if there isn't something in your area, then maybe you want to organize something like that. And I wouldn't limit it just to yoga teachers. So you might have like a group, a business group that you're part of, or something like that. So look around in your area. I bet you there's something regular happening that's kind of a networking thing already. And it might be online as well. So I'm part of an online business group, and I feel like that's where a lot of referrals come. So Carol's also in that business group. I've learned from them, and I'm quick to refer out like, oh, this person specializes in that. And I think that's an important thing as a yoga teacher. The more you define this core message, we're going to get how this affects our marketing next, the more you can be seen as like, oh, reach out to that person, they know about that. That's kind of with the niche work a little bit more, but I think it's important to know, refer out to other people. If you're like, I don't teach prenatal yoga now, and so this person does. Okay. So getting clear on what you do really helps to make your decisions. That's the one, your marketing decisions. We're going to get into all decisions of marketing is simplified. So how can it's kind of like when you have that core message and you have your elevator speech, and these are all in the back of your mind, you know what you're going to talk to. So you know your ideal yoga students, and you kind of know what their issues are, and you know how to talk to them because this is the work that you're really passionate about sharing. That seems a little vague. There is a lot more to this for sure, because I teach a 3-hour online course just to find your niche, and it's for this. But trust me that when you do this, even this tiny little bit of work today, if you went through those few questions that I gave you and you kind of looked at what your elevator speech is in terms of the tool from Carol, and then you add in the 3 whys, all of that together is going to help you to give your message a little bit more. And I have an example of this. I'm sure I didn't. Yes, I did an example for you guys. So this gets a little bit into story, because we talked about how important story is. And it gets a little bit into how this simplifies marketing. So for instance, myself, I can say, if someone came up to me and said, what do you do? One of the options I could use is I could say, I'm a podcaster. Or, like some people might be like, oh, I listen to podcasts. The conversation might start, but instead, I could start with my why. Like, as a yoga teacher, I was feeling like I was really left out in the wilderness of this whole yoga business world. And every time I leave a teacher training, I feel like that. That's my big why for it. And I feel like I leave this motivation to practice yoga all the time, and I leave the information feed of like, oh, I'm learning new things all the time. And I leave this supportive community of yoga teachers. So I really know this, and you guys may have heard it in my intro in the podcast as well. That's my really big why. And I wanted to have this place where I could connect with other yoga teachers and professionals that would help me, but also provide that for other people. And I felt like this is something that I really wanted to offer. Now this is snowballed because now here we have a live show every week, and we have the Facebook group for yoga teachers, but it's exactly with my core message with that. So the big why behind that, the kind of the story and how the marketing works, is that I know how those yoga teachers feel because I'm one of those teachers. So I travel a lot to and from classes, so I can listen to a podcast in the car or while I'm cleaning or doing whatever. And I like to be able to take in little snippets of information. So going to a yoga teacher training, even this weekend at the Toronto Yoga Show, was tons of information. But I want to get like a little snippet every week. And for some people, that's the live video. For some people, it's a podcast. For some of you, wow, it's both. I really appreciate when you say that you love both the video and the podcast. So this is where we get into the question of what problem is this solving for your ideal yoga student. So the way you get into that, the way you dive into that a little bit more as a yoga teacher, look at your big why of why you're doing this, and that will simplify your marketing message. You know, if you're teaching yoga for sleep, you might be really passionate about people getting proper rest. You might understand what that feels like to not be able to sleep and have had yoga help you. So that's where the story really helps, and it also helps to clarify your marketing. Those two kind of go together. And then the last one is to kind of let your introduction flow and be your authentic self. So you guys just heard me introduce myself. As the host of this live show, you know that I do a podcast, and you know that I'm a yoga teacher. And I know a lot of you are doing other jobs other than just being a yoga teacher. So flow with that. You know, if you're somewhere and you feel like, you know what, this is the place to introduce myself in a way that promotes the work that I do as a yoga teacher, then do that. Be really authentic with it. And just be yourself. Don't feel like, oh, I heard someone give this elevator speech and I want to change it to be mine. For sure, use examples, but make it really your true message. Because that's what connects us to people, is really being our authentic self. And we're pretty good at thinking, well, I want to, you know, be a better person. I want to look at the yamas and niyamas as a yoga teacher and then see how I can do that. But really at the core of who you are is this amazing, authentic person. So, yeah, let that message out into the world. It's so fun to see people when they're really standing in that. And it feels really amazing as well. I feel like I can just be myself when I talk to you guys in the live show. And that's really empowering. So, okay, a few little notes before we finish. I just want to check that oh yeah, and connect with people when you meet with them. That was my last note on that. I think I've hit all my notes. I wanted to be sure today. So a few little other notes for you guys. The pelvic health course is coming up online April the 20th. Anyone can take it. There's replay videos as long as you're a 200-hour certified yoga teacher. Any teacher can take it. And if you feel like, you know what, I can't take, for our Connected Yoga Teacher Facebook group, you guys get a discount in there as well. If you want to know more, message me about that. And if you cannot take that, not to worry, or if you can take it, it's going to be a little extra in that. The next 3 episodes of the podcast are going to be specialized in pelvic health. So it's kind of like a little mini-series. We have Trista Zinn coming in and talking with us, Kim Vopney, and Shelly Prosco. And I'm really excited. This information applies to all yoga teachers. You guys are going to love it. If you're passionate about pelvic health or you're just passionate about helping your students and learning new things, you're going to love that. And then the next live show, next Monday, we're going to talk about creating your what to have on your website. So for those of you who are thinking about doing a website, or if you have a website and you just want to give it a little refresh, then tune in for that show as well. And then also I wanted to put a note out there. If any of you went to the Toronto Yoga Show and I didn't already connect with you, I would love some little key takeaways. And the way I would like to put together a podcast episode, it hasn't happened yet. I can't promise it's going to happen for sure. But my idea is to just get some key takeaways. And I mean like what to pack and what to bring with you, or here's something that I learned from a specific teacher, or here's something I'm bringing into my own practice now that I learned, or this is a great place to eat when you're in Toronto near the yoga conference. Any of these things, I would be thrilled if you guys want to share some of that. And it would just be like a 10 or 15 minute interview. If you're interested in doing that, message me for sure, info@shannoncrow.com, or put a little note here. And there's an application on the website for anyone who's interested in being on the podcast. I do have quite a plan in mind already, and I see what fits in, so I cannot promise it. But for those of you who went to the Toronto Yoga Show, I'd love to hear from you. Okay, you guys, have an awesome week. Thanks for sharing your yoga with the world. And if you're not there yet, thanks for thinking about doing it. The world can really use the yoga, the unique yoga that you share. So have a great week, you guys. Bye.